to welcome back Reza Rad to the Power BI Community Times in Florida. Good to have you here. Super excited about your presentation on row-level security. When you're ready, please feel free to introduce yourself and start the presentation.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all the introductions. So let me first share my screen, see if it works. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen. And we'll change it to slideshow. Yeah, so do you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, right, cool. Thank you, Cecilia, for introduction and for the opportunity to present. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and those of you later on watching the recordings. So this session is about row-level security patterns in Power BI, and we mainly focus on row-level security. I wouldn't talk about column-level security or object-level security. Those are also possible to be done in Power BI, but that is not the focus of this session. If you have any questions, we can go through those. The link to materials, I'll send it also to Cecilia so that she can share it with you all. A little bit about me. I'm Reza Rad. I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand, 18 hours ahead of Florida time zone now. I am a blogger. I write about Power BI subjects, and I also create YouTube videos. I have written some books, 12 books on Power BI subjects. Some of these are free books. You can go and download it from RADACAD website. And I've been a Microsoft MVP for a number of years, and I'm a Microsoft Regional Director as well. But all of that means that I'm not working for Microsoft. I have let's say a consulting business, which is mostly RADACAD, doing all the consulting and training and advisory on Power BI. Anyway, so that's enough about me. Let's talk about the row-level security. So I don't do much of a slide. If you have been in my presentations before, I'm mainly doing demos. So let's jump into demos directly. So I have a Power BI file, which I want to start with that. And I'll explain what the row-level security is, just in case that some of you might be new to this subject. We'll talk about it first, what it is, the very beginner example of that, and then we build on top of it with more, let's say, next level examples. So row-level security starts when you want to share one layout of the report, one report page, or a number of pages, doesn't really matter. You want to share these with different users, different audiences in a way that they see their own data. They don't see everything. For example, if you are working in a company that has, let's say, 6 different branches in 6 different countries, US, Canada, France, UK, Germany, Australia, and if you have a report like this, which might have, let's say, 10 or 15 report pages, when you build this report, instead of creating copies of this report, one for each country, and filtering it for that country so that the users of that country wouldn't see other reports, instead of creating those copies, which would cause a lot of maintenance, because then you have like 6 different copies of a report. If you want to apply a change, you have to go and change it in 6 different places. So instead of doing all of those, we create one report and we share this one report with the audience, but we implement something called row-level security, which would then enables us to separate the audience, so that, for example, the salesperson of Australia would see only Australia's data, salesperson of UK would see only UK data, but all within one report. So we wouldn't really create copies of the report. As a result, it would be much easier to maintain. So let's look at this example. In this example, it's a really simple visual I have here, sales for each country, and this is the total sales. This is from the AdventureWorks Excel file sample data source, which you can download it from RADACAD website. All of these demos I'm going to show you in this session, you can download it using that link to the download materials that I'm going to share later on. So my sample data set is like this. I have just 2 tables. One table is the sales table itself. So this has all the sales information, a lot of details like the date of the sales and let's say quantity, sales amount itself, things like that. But one of those information is the connection to this dimension called dim sales territory. And in dim sales territory, we have the country and location information. So if I'll show you what that table looks like, this is dim sales territory. We have a column called sales territory country, which shows what country this sales has been. For example, if it's been in UK or it's been in Germany, Australia, US. So this is the column in this table. We do not have the sales territory country in the sales column itself, but because these two tables are related to each other, you see there's a relationship between these two tables, and the direction of relationship is this way. This means that if I go ahead and filter, for example, sales territory country here to filter all the US data, as a result, this table would only show me the sales for US data. If I go and change that to Canada, the other one would show Canada's data. That is basically the meaning of the relationship in Power BI, that you filter this table, the direction of relationship will propagate the relationship that way in the direction of the relationship, and then the other table gets filtered. So now where do we apply this filter? This filter has to be applied in the security section in Power BI under manage roles. This is where we go and define roles in Power BI. So I'm going to first delete these two that already exist so that you see what is the process of creating it. It's a pretty simple process to create a role. So by default, a Power BI model doesn't have any roles. So it would be like this. When it is like this, that means if I share it with a group of people, they will see everything in that report, everything in that visualization, nothing filtered. They can use the slicers and filters to filter the data, but they can also unfilter it and see everything in there. When I create roles, then I can create groups of people that what they would see. So I'll create a role here. Let's call it US sales person or manager, whatever you might call it. Then I'll see the tables in my model. As you see, these are the two tables that I have here. So these are those two tables. Then I have to select which table I'm going to filter by which column. So my filter rule here is going to be the country column, which is in sales territory, dim sales territory, to be equal to United States. So I'll go and do that in here. So clicking on this, add filter for the country, and then this would automatically write that filter expression for me. I'll just change this to United States. It's not case sensitive. This is DAX expression. DAX expression by default is not case sensitive unless you use some specific functions to make it case sensitive, like find, search. There are some functions that you can switch between case sensitive or not. In this case, it is better to not be case sensitive. And this expression written here has to be an expression that returns a true or false value. It's a conditional expression. When it returns true, that means allowed to see this result. So what this role means is that if the country is equal to United States, this role is allowed to see the result, right? Then I go and create another one. Let's say this one is for Canada, salesperson, and I'll go and do the same thing here for Canada. These values that you are writing here should match the values that you have in that dim sales territory table within that column. So we need to go and create all of the 6, let's say, countries if you want to do it properly. But for now, this should be enough. So I'll just save it so that I can show you how it works. I'll go back to the report page. In the report page, you still see everything is still the same thing. Nothing really changed. Because Power BI Desktop is a developer environment. Inside Power BI Desktop, you will see everything, regardless of the row level security, because you are looking at it from a developer point of view. So you will see everything. But you can test it, what the user would see. To do that testing, we'll go to that security section again, under modeling security section. This time we will use this, view as. So when I say view as, I'll go and choose, let's say, US salesperson to see what it looks like. So before selecting that, it is $80 million total sales and sales for each country. But when I click on that, now it shows $53 million sales, and that is the entire sales of United States. And that is not just for this report page, for all pages that might be in this report that would get filtered. I can now go and change it to Canada salesperson. That is showing me the total sales of Canada. And in case you have someone having access to both of these roles, that person will see these two countries, but nothing else, right? So that is the process. And I can then say stop viewing so that this goes back to the default view. This is for your own testing. This is not really a place that users will have the option to go and select it. So one step was to create these roles, which we did. Another step is to assign users to this role. And that bit cannot be done in here in Power BI Desktop. To assign users to the roles, you have to go to the Power BI website. So after building this report, after creating the roles, you publish this report into the Power BI website. I already done that. This is another example of that report I published in the Power BI website. When I go and open it, you will see the report. I'll just refresh it, that it comes up. So this is something similar to that report, right? Now, still, I would see everything. The person who publishes the report is like a report owner. Report owner will see everything, right? Even if this report is published into a workspace and I have the contributor access or member access or admin access, any of those accesses that is basically giving me edit access, I would see everything. Role level security will be applied only for those with view access, either in the workspace or in the app. All of those would get the result of this through the role level security. Okay, so I have this report. Now I want to go and assign users to this. I'll go and choose the related content so that I see the data set of this report. The role level security configuration is part of the data set, which means that if you have multiple reports connecting to the same data set, you just specify role level security in the data set and all reports would follow that rules. Under the data set, I'll go to the security. Here I would see the roles. Now, the one that I published, I had these two roles in it. I had one for Australia, one for Canada. I'm going to remove these users and do it again so that you see how this works. So I have these roles and there is no one assigned to it. To assign someone to this role, you just go and type their Power BI account. Now, ideally, you don't want this to be using their Power BI accounts. Ideally, you want this to be their Azure Active Directory group, because if you have a group of Australia sales manager, then adding and removing people from that group is much easier. You just go to Office 365, add and remove people from that group instead of coming each time in here and having access to the data set to do that, right? But this is an example, so I'll just follow this on a direct user account address. So I'll save this. Now I'm going to share this report with the user to see what the user would see. So copy the link. And I have my other user logged in another window. Here it is. I'll go to that report. This is the same report with that user. And as you see, with this user, when I go to the report, I don't really see any other countries. I'll just bring the report in the other account so that you can compare the two. So the one behind is the full view of the report. That is what I see as the report developer because I have the full access. But this is the view of the user who is Australia sales person. This user will not even have the option to go and select, will not even see other countries, right? And managing this control is quite simple. I can go and back to the data set security. I can go and add this user, let's say now to Canada sales manager. Let's say this user got promoted and now has access to Canada sales as well. Then in the other report in here, if I go and just do a refresh, now this should include both of those countries, right? But not other countries. So it's a quite simple process. You have a central access to manage who have access to what role. In that Power BI dataset, you go and create that roles, just as simple as that process. And then you just share the report with those users. They will see their own data. This is called row level security, not role level. Role is what you create in here. But this is called row, like a data row level, because the reason for that is that you apply this filter on a row level. Like when you say country is equal to United Kingdom, you are filtering that row. When you say country is equal to United States, you are filtering all rows which matches United States, right? So this is row level security, and it works really simple. There is a problem, however, with that when the roles are changing quite frequently. Let's say, as an example, right now we have these 6 countries. If after a while a new branch in a new country is opened in this business, let's say South Africa. So what do we need to do? As a Power BI developer, I need to open the PBIX file in Power BI Desktop. I need to go manage roles. Then I need to create a new role for that. Then publish this Power BI file into the service. After publishing it, I need to go and assign users to it. I need to do that process every time something changes. After a couple of weeks, if there's a new branch in China, I need to do that process again. Open the Power BI Desktop, open the file in Power BI Desktop, go to manage roles, add a new role, publish it, assign users to this role. This process is quite a lot for just maintaining a role. And if it is, let's say, only changing like once every few months and things like that, that is simple, you'll do that. But if this change is happening like every day, every week, then it is not something we do it through this method. This method is called static row level security. And the reason it is called the static row level security is that, well, we have these values hard coded inside the Power BI, meaning that every time we want to change a role, we have to come and open the Power BI Desktop file to go and change it, versus compared to dynamic row level security. In dynamic row level security situation, you have these logic inside your data model, not in the Power BI file. Inside the data model, I mean in the tables, in the relationship between tables, so that if something changes, you just go and add new records into the tables that you have in your model and everything works. You don't need to open Power BI Desktop file again. You don't need to assign users to it again. All of that would just work really simple. You need to spend more time to set up a dynamic row level security at the beginning, but it would be much easier to maintain in a long run. So let me open one dynamic row level security example and show it to you. I have a file in here. Okay, yep, that looks good. Now I'm still keeping it with the context of just 2 tables, nothing really complicated. One of these tables is more like a sales rep. Another is the actual sales transactions. So it is almost opening. Okay, here it is. So this is my sales rep table. Still loading. Yeah, here it is. So this is my sales rep table. As you see, I have the ID of the sales rep. Sorry. The name of the sales rep and the email account. Now, this email account is the important column here. This should be their Power BI account. Now, you see, mine is not really like other accounts, and that is because I used my local account. I'm logged in my computer as a local account, so I use it as a testing. But ideally, this should be all similar, like your tenant, email, account, whatever that users use to log into their Power BI account. Then I have another table, and this table is just the sales transaction itself. It tells me that at this date, this sales rep made this much of sales amount, right? Really simple model. And these two tables are connected to each other, just like that. Sales rep connected to the sales transaction using that sales rep ID. Then what I'm going to show in here, let me remove this visual for a second. What I'm going to show here is just a table visual showing all the sales transactions, the name of the sales rep, the email address of the sales rep, the date of the transaction, and the actual sales amount itself. This is a sample data set, so it has only 4 records, but this can be like millions of records. Now, imagine you want to build something like this, and you are working in a company that has, let's say, 500 sales reps or 1,000 sales reps. You don't want to go and create one role per each of those. Now, in the sales scenario, this might look too much, let's say 1,000 sales rep, but you can imagine that in a payroll situation. If you want to create a payroll report, you have, let's say, 1,000 employees in this organization. Each of those should see their own data. So we wouldn't go and create a role per person in that scenario. What we will do is we will first find out who logged in to the Power BI. When we find out who logged into the Power BI, then we will filter this column, the email column, to match with that account. With one role, all of those would be done. So how do we find out who logged into the Power BI? There is a DAX function, really simple DAX function that you can use. This is the function, user principal name. No need to put a input for it. It's just like that, user principal name. This will tell you who is logged into the system. Now, I used it here as a measure just to show you what it looks like. If I show that measure inside a card visual, you see this shows me my local user because now I logged into here using my local account. Here, this is my local account. But if I have the same report published into the Power BI website, which I do have something similar to that, then this will show me my Power BI account. So here you see this now shows me my Power BI account, which actually matches with the Power BI account that I have. So whatever account that your Power BI users are using to log into the Power BI environment, this would detect that user principal name function is just doing that. Really helpful. Now that we have this, the only thing that we need to do is to create a role and say that whatever the result of this is, I want that to be matched with this column, the email column, right? And that is done by simply just creating a role. One role, I'll just delete it and create it again so that you can see. You just need one role. You can call it user or anything. The name isn't really important. The table we are filtering is the table that has this column in it, the sales rep, and the column is email column. That should be equal to user principal name. We could even say that this is equal to that measure we created. So that would be also fine to say this is equal to user, but I just created the measure to show you what it looks like. You don't really need to create the measure to get it working. You can just directly type it in here. And that's it. Now, if I go and test it, to test it, we can go to view as, and I can use that user. So as you see right now, I see all the 4 transactions before applying that. But if I change it to the user, now the user, this will be my user. So this should only filter for that 2 transactions. When I click OK, you see this only shows me those 2 transactions. And across everywhere in the report, I would see only my own transactions. If I publish this report, share it with all the users in my organizations, then they would see only their own transactions. If they don't have a record in this table, in the sales rep table, they wouldn't see anything. If they have a record in this table, they would see only the sales transactions that are related to their own record. That is because we have this relationship between the 2 tables. So using this approach, you just create one role, you save this report, you publish it. When you publish this report, you assign all users within your organization to that role. You don't have to separate them by the roles and things like that, because that separation is already done in the data model. In the data model, it already knows that these users are those who have made, for example, these sales transactions. Your model keeps this logic instead of the Power BI file. So this is called dynamic role-level security. Dynamic role-level security is much easier to maintain, of course. Like, let's say, if someone adds to my company, my organization, I just need to make sure that that person has a record in this table. And this table can be populated by a lot of different ways. There are, if you search on internet, there are PowerShell scripts that you can run on a scheduled basis. It gives you the entire Azure Active Directory list, then you can load it into a table overnight and use Power BI to get data from it. Power BI itself has the ability to get data from Active Directory, but I think it is on-prem Active Directory. I'm not sure does it work for Azure Active Directory or not. There are many approaches. You can find definitely ways to get those information, but you need to have enough access to get the list of those Active Directory accounts. So that is dynamic role-level security. Now, the thing is that if dynamic role-level security is that simple, then why there are lots of questions and challenges about it. The dynamic role-level security is highly dependent on how your tables are connected to each other, how the relationships are, and the way that you write your expression. This was a really simple model. We just had sales rep, sales transaction, just 2 tables. In real world situation, you never have 2 tables in your model. You have like 20 tables, 15 tables, more, lots of tables, like filtering each other in a direction that you don't want. So it becomes a lot of challenges to how to keep this dynamic role-level security working, right? So I'm going to show you some different patterns of that dynamic role-level security. Before that, any questions we have so far, or shall I just proceed?
I'm used to the personnel being in a table that's actually controlled by either the personnel department or the department heads. But it would simply work the same way, right?
Yes.
Rather than you having to populate it.
Yeah, that's right. You can have, let's say, I don't know, let's say a custom application. This can be Power Apps or any, let's say, custom C# VB.NET application that you have built, and your HR department is keeping this table up to date. So they enter those information into that application. That application updates the table backend in the database, and then your Power BI reads from that database. Okay, right. So let me show you now another example of dynamic role-level security. Let's go step by step. Let's say I want to build a scenario that everyone see their own data when they log in, but then we have a manager in this company. Let's say for now, let's say this is a really simple structure. We have one manager and everyone else is employee. We'll talk about hierarchical structure later, but let's assume this is like one manager, everyone's employee type of scenario. So if we have one manager and everyone else is employee, how can we write the roles in a way that says, for example, everyone see their own data, but when the manager logs in, manager will see everything, right? The first time you think about it, you would say, well, we go to manage roles and we create one role for manager, right? And then, well, what do we write for the manager to say that this manager has access to everything? This is a conditional expression, so it returns true or false. True means have access, false means no access. So we can just simply write true, or we can just write nothing. But writing nothing can be a little bit like misleading. That does this means have access or don't have access? So writing true might be a better idea. So something like that would work, right? I would have one role for manager, one role for user. I publish this report into the website, and then I assign users to this. But the moment that you go and create your second role in here, you are bringing the logic of role definition inside the Power BI desktop. And that means that for any changes in the future, you have to go and open the Power BI desktop file and make some changes. So that makes it, again, static role level security. Part of it is dynamic, part of it is static. So one better way to do it is to not do it this way. So don't really create this manager role in here, but use the same role that we have written here in a way that we write the conditional expression somehow to check that is this user a manager or not, right? Now I'm going to show you another example that we have similar to this. Let me go and open that one, so don't save this. Now this is exactly similar to that example you saw before. The only difference is that I have added a column in the sales rep table so that I can identify who is manager, who is not. Remember, the logic should be in the data model. So if I want to have the logic of is manager in the data model, then it can be a column as simple as this, right? So in my sales rep table, I have a column that says is manager or not. As I said, this is not management hierarchy. It is just like one level of management. So the person who has this is manager 1 means that that person is the manager, right? So then, and the rest is the same. So this would have relationship with the sales transaction. So back to the report. Here I have the similar report. I have a way that I can identify who logged into the system. Already we know that. That is using the user principal name function. Now I need to just one step further. After finding who logged into the system, I need to find out, is this person a manager or not? I'm going to write a measure for this. It is always easier to write your calculation or formula in here, because here you have a better place to write DAX rather than in that manage roles, which is more like a text editor. So I'm going to write this here. I would call this checking is manager or not. Okay, to check is this person a manager or not, first I need to find out who logged into the system. So that is user principal name. Then I need to find the record with that user principal name in the email, and I need to get the is manager column of that record. There are multiple ways you can write something like this in DAX. You can apply a filter, then from that filter get max, min, something like that. Or you can use lookup value or many other methods. I'm going to use lookup value. Lookup value is quite a simple function to use in this situation. So first I would say, what is the result column I want? So I want the is manager column. This is manager column is what I'm looking for. What column I'm searching? I'm searching in the email column. And what is the value I'm searching? The value I'm searching is this user principal name. So if you come from, let's say, SQL background, you can read it like this, that select is manager where email equals user principal name. That is how you would read it. It's like a simple select statement. Now I'm going to show that in a card visual. And it tells me that 0 means I'm not a manager. So my user right now is not a manager. That is why it is 0. If I go and change my user, where is this? This one. Oh, this one. So if I go and change this to manager, just like that, that is how easy it is to become a manager in our company. So I just change this. Now I'm the manager and I just refresh this file. This should now change to 1, showing that I'm a manager. Okay, so I have a method, simple method that can determine am I a manager or not, right? So after I wrote this, then I can go and enhance this a little bit more in my role definition. So I would go to manage roles. I'll just create one role, user. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an if expression here. Remember, this should return true or false value. So it's a conditional expression. So I'm going to write an if expression. If everything that I had there, right? If all of this equals to 0, then it means I'm not a manager, right? So if I'm not a manager, then what should I write here? I should write exactly what I had in the previous example. In the previous example, we had this bit saying that the email account equals, the email column equals to user principal name, right? Because I'm not a manager. So when I'm not a manager, I should see my own records, right? So if this is true, then this. Else means that I am a manager. So if I am a manager, then I should see everything, right? And for that, I can just simply type true. Because true means see everything, right? So this bit means I'm the manager. This bit means I'm not a manager, right? Check mark. If I missed anything, so if lookup value is equal to 0.
True is misspelled.
True. Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you. Correct. So save. Now I'm going to check that. So right now I'm the manager. So meaning that if I go and test with my own user, I should still see all the records, right? So I'll go and choose that. And I see all the records, so nothing really changed. I'm going to make some changes and see how this works. So my period of management was really short. Now I'm not manager anymore. Leila is manager as always. So if I refresh this now, this should identify that I'm not a manager, and then I should see my own records, right? As you see. So everyone would see their own records if they are not a manager. If they are a manager, they would see everything. But this expression needs to be looked at more carefully, because what happens is that this bit, the lookup value, if it is looking for a person and that person is not in that table, this would return blank. Let's say I'm looking for, I don't know, Mark, and there is no record with Mark. This would return blank. Blank is not equal to 0, so then it would end up here, else. So then Mark would be considered as a manager. So probably this is not the best way to write it. For this type of circumstances, I would say, well, let's first check is manager or not, right? If manager, do this. If not manager, do that, right? I changed the kind of like the way that I checked it. So this way we would only do it if this person is in that record, is in that table and is manager. If not, we will show only their own records. And if Mark is not in that table, is not manager, so nothing will, not all the data will be revealed. And also because not in that table, so Mark wouldn't see anything. So you need to be really careful about how you write your conditional expression. Okay, any questions on this before the next part? No. Okay, sounds good. Right. So let me show you one other situation. Now this one is slightly different. I'll bring the completed example and I'll then explain how the process is. So let's take that sales rep scenario to a different level. In a real world situation, you don't have one person being sales rep of, let's say, Florida, or one person sales rep of California. You might have multiple people doing that. On the other hand side, you might have one person being sales rep of multiple locations, multiple branches. So it is possible that you have a many-to-many situation. I have a different structure this time. This time I have a table called profile. The profile table is basically those sales manager or sales rep type of table, right? So it says we have a Seattle sales manager, Chicago sales manager, Portland sales manager, and their IDs. In the sales transaction, we know that which profile, let's say sales rep of Chicago, sales rep of Portland, are related to that sales amount, but then these are not related to the user. User, we have a table for user, which is like this, their names, their ID, their email account. Now, because the user can have multiple profiles and each profile can be assigned to multiple users, we have this table, user profile table. For example, it tells me that Reza is sales rep of this place. Also, Reza is sales rep of another place, right? And on the other hand side, for example, this place can have multiple sales reps, right? So it's a many-to-many situation. So our model is something like this, right? It's not 2 tables, it's 4 tables. The user table is here, and the sales transactions are in here, right? So with a model like this, if we proceed and write a expression like what we did before in the user table in the managed roles, and we say the email address equals to user principal name, let's see what happens. So if I go ahead and filter this and say this email is equal to user principal name, so this, let's say Reza like this. So this understand that this is Reza. The direction of relationship means that this Reza will be filtered in here as well. So this table would also get filtered by Reza. So we would only see profiles for the Reza. But then this table will not filter profile table. And that is because of this. The direction of relationship in here is single directional from profile to the user profile, not the other way around. What we want is that we want this table to filter all the way in here, right? So this does not support that direction of relationship. It looks like that there is like a wall in between these that your filter does not pass. So then no matter what you filter to here you said Reza, this will not get filtered by that. So we would have all the profiles for Reza and we would have all sales transactions for Reza. So this would not work that way. Then what should we do? So one simple approach is you go and change the direction of relationship to both directional, like what most of the people do, which is not a good idea. And then you can also check this box as well. You probably have seen that before. What that means is exactly for this row level security situation. But I wouldn't recommend this, right? Even if you can do this, I wouldn't recommend it because this would bring performance impact. Even in a smaller model with a small data set, you would definitely see the performance impact of that. It would solve the problem, but it would bring another problem of the performance in the future. And because row level security is across your entire reports visual, so everywhere, everything would be slow. Instead of that, you have to find a way to do it without changing the direction of relationship. To do that without changing direction of relationship, meaning that you have to probably filter another table. The final goal is to filter this table, right? Because that is where the main important values are, which is sales amount. So we know that these two cannot filter that table, but we know that this table can filter that table because the direction of relationship here is in the direction that we want, right? So I need to find a way that I write an expression in here saying that filter this profile ID to match all the profile IDs for Reza. So we know Reza logged in. We know these are all profile IDs for Reza. These two gets filtered. This would filter based on that. Would be a DAX expression to find that out. What are all the profile IDs for Reza and then go and filter it. This is a sample expression that does something like that. I'll explain that step by step. So the first part is we would filter the user profile table. This is that many-to-many relationship table. We would filter that table based on the email account, which is not in the user profile. It is in the user table, and that is why we use the related function, matches the user principal name. So then this bit would give me all the records in the user profile table that are for the logged in user. Then from that, here we have the select column. So from there to here, let's consider it. Then we would say from that table, it has two columns, basically. One is profile ID, the other one is user ID. I don't want the user ID, I just want the profile ID. So that is why I say select column profile. So then it would be a column with a table with single column, profile column, and these would be all the profile IDs for that user specifically. And then finally, we have this bit saying that the ID of the profile table should match that virtual table with list of IDs. And it works fine. It is using virtual table, so it would be still a bit slow, but it's nothing compared to that post-directional relationship that would make it super slow. This would be just working fine. We had it in large data sets and it works really fine. What you would notice is that here in my role, I also have another filter. And this is also important too, especially when you have too many tables, like what tables should you filter? So filtering that profile table in the way that we did is fine. So it makes sure that the profile table gets filtered, this gets filtered, but that does not filter the user table. Exactly because of the same situation. We filtered this table would filter this and would filter that. But because of this relationship direction, it would not filter that. So users, if we have a slicer for all the users, this slicer will show everyone, right? It would not impact the sales transactions. So we just see sales transactions of the logged in user, but we would see still a slicer of all users. To avoid that from happening, you can apply the filter on multiple tables. So here I have applied, in addition to what I applied on the profile table, I applied a filter on the user table. And on the user table, this is just as simple as saying that their email account is equal to user principal name. So as a result, anyone with this role would get this table filtered, and these two tables, when they are filtered, they would filter everything else in the data model, and the result would all get filtered. Right. Now, if I want to test it, I just go to view as role. Now you see we have like 3 profiles, but my account is only related to 2 of these profiles. If I go to this user, I would see only 2 profiles and all the sales transactions related to those profiles. You see this is the table that has only users. That table also gets filtered. So everything gets filtered based on that. So when you have multiple tables, multiple relationships, you have to make sure that first you write the DAX expression on the right table that filters other tables. And second thing is that it is very likely that you may need to write that logic in multiple tables rather than just one table. Okay, right. So then the last example I'm going to show you is an example of a hierarchy. So that manager example I showed you, which is like we have a manager and this manager see everything, users will see their own data. In real world situation, it's not like that. In real world situation, you have an organizational hierarchy. Like, for example, you have a manager managing 2 people, so that manager only should see the let's say records for that person and those 2 people. Someone then managing that manager would see all of those records, or something like that. Let's say we have a hierarchy like this. If Lindsay logs in, Lindsay should see her own records. If Amy logs in, Amy should see Amy and Lindsay. If I log in, I should see all of these, but nothing from the other part of the hierarchy, right? So this is like an organizational hierarchy. How we do something like this? In situations like this, we have usually a organizational hierarchy table like this. Let's first focus on this. Oh, sorry. Zooming again. So let's first focus on this bit. I'll talk about that part later. Let's for now just look at this bit. So the way that we usually have these organizational hierarchies are like this. These are users, employees, whatever you might call it. Each employee has an ID and then also has a manager ID. This manager ID goes back to another record in the same table. In this case, you see this is Amy. Amy has another manager, which goes back again to another record in the same table. And this can go like more than 2 levels. It can be 10, 15 levels of management. For some, it might be 3 levels of management. For some, it might be 7 levels of management. You never know. So what is the structure for this? What is the way to write the formula for this? We have a set of functions in DAX, which are really helpful in this type of structures. They're called parent-child functions. Path is the main function across all of those. It's a simple function. You just pass 2 parameters. One parameter is the ID of the current user, and then the manager ID of that, right? So I just passed these 2 and added this as a column, and here is the result of that column. So you see that right now here, this column is telling me that, for example, this user is user number 8, manager of that is number 5, manager of that is number 1. Or for example, this user Bill is number 6, manager of that is number 4, Mark, manager of that is number 2, Layla, right? So very helpful. Now what you need to do is now becomes much simpler, because first you identify who logged into the system. Let's say Reza, Layla, whoever. Let's say, for example, it is Layla logged into the system. If you identify that Layla logged into the system, you find out what is the ID of Layla. It's 2. Then you need to go to this column and filter all the records that there is a 2 somewhere in that path. It might not be always the first part of the path. It might be somewhere in the middle of the path as well. So you have to go and find it. There is a function that does this for you, so you don't really need to use text search or text.contains. You can use path contains. Path contains will look into the path column and check if that path contains that ID or not. So it's 2-step process. First, finding the ID of the person logged in. Second, which path contains that. And the expression for that would become like this. So this bit is to find out who logged into the system. Remember in that second example, I used lookup value to do it. Now this is another method to do it. First, I filtered the user table for all the records that their email is equal to user principal name. Then from that, I picked the user ID. I could have used lookup value again here as well. This gives me the ID of the person logged in, and then I would use path contains, saying that this path column should contain the ID fetched in there. So if I log into the system, then I should see only my own hierarchy. If I change it, you'll see how this would work. This shows me my own hierarchy. If Layla logs in, she should see her own tree. If Mark logs in, would see his own tree. So everyone would see their own hierarchy of organization from themselves to below, right? And one last thing, I'm not going to show you the full example or explain the whole thing. It's quite a bit of explanation. I'll just show you what might be, let's say, next level or another level in this type of calculation or this type of row level security. Again, in real world, you don't have one person having one role. Let's say if the role is accountant, you don't have one person as accountant. Probably in the organization, there are 5 accountants. There are 2 senior accountants. There are 5 general managers. So we have that hierarchy table. But that hierarchy table, which in this case, let me show you the data, that would make sense more. So that hierarchical structure of the data is this, which does not belong to the people. It belongs to their positions, like this is CEO, CFO, accountant, finance analyst, general manager, and then you have this hierarchical level, which they have manager ID. But then you should have users assigned to these. And because each user might have multiple roles or one role might belong to multiple users, then we have a user organization many-to-many relationship. So the situation would be like this. We have the hierarchical structure in here, and we have users in here. Users and this hierarchical structure has a many-to-many relationship, and then we have sales transaction. This would become another challenge. It's combining that hierarchical structure with many-to-many situations. So would require a little bit more filtering. As you see, it's a little bit longer DAX expression. It's quite a bit of explanation how this works, because there are some tricks in between that. You should like write the calculation in a way that doesn't follow the normal relationship rules. And that is why you see that I have used some of functions such as cross join and things like that. But I have explained that across 2 different articles in my blog, so you can go and check that. All of these are mentioned in that blog. I'll strongly recommend you to go and have a look at that. That would also be helpful for learning the DAX as well, because dynamic row-level security is all about DAX at the end. In terms of dynamic row-level security, we can do lots of talking and lots of different examples. I have written some more articles about this. Like another most common scenario I get question is that how can I have totals, like calculate this versus total? Reza see his own data, but well, I want to compare Reza's value with the total average so that he can check where he is at. For something like that, you normally create a total table separately, making sure that that table does not get filtered with your user table, because if it gets filtered, then that total wouldn't be really total. So that table should not really get filtered, and it is aggregated. Then you use that in your calculation. Or another scenario is how to do data masking in Power BI, which means that you don't want to really you don't want to filter the data. You want the data to be there, but the users to not see the data. Like they see that this is for branch X, but they don't know what the branch X is. This is masked. Or they see this is branch Y. They don't know. They just see their own branch information. All other branch information are X, Y, Z, things like that. So you can also read through that. As I said, there are many different examples I explained through. You can find information about all of these. Slides are already shared, and I have written a book on row-level security, which I'm hopeful that I can have a second edition of that early next year, hopefully. Any questions?
I don't see question, but someone is saying that it's not available on Kindle. Or maybe it's a country thing.
Maybe, yeah, maybe in that country is not available on Kindle. This is also available in Google Books, and I think Google Books is available in 66 countries. Kindle probably not in that many countries. So yeah, across Google Books or Kindle, you should be able to find it somewhere, hopefully.
So I have a question, Reza.
Yes.
Reza. So the object level security, would that basically follow the same rules as the row level security?
Yeah, it is usually even much simpler with the object level security, because you don't really expect much of a change in the, like, data rows change quite often. You get new record, new employee coming, lots of things changing. In terms of like columns or the table, object level security or column level security, you only change it if the structure of the data changes. And if the structure of the data changes, you can come and modify that. So yes, you write formula for that, but really simple expressions, just saying that, for example, this role has access to this table, or this role has access to this column. And the way that you need to do it is not through Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop doesn't have this functionality to apply row levels, to apply object level security or column level security, not yet. The data model supports it, the Power BI Desktop doesn't support it. So you need to use a tool like Tabular Editor, for example, or Visual Studio to connect to the Power BI Desktop model, apply these changes, and then once applied, you can save it back to the Power BI model, then publish it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I just posted the link to the Google book.
Oh, yep, thank you. See that?
I didn't know this existed at all.
Yeah, I didn't know the first time as well. We got some, like when we published our books, like few years earlier, first time ourselves, we got some comments that it's not available in here. Can you publish it in Google Books? Then we realized that there is something called Google Books.
But it's actually also super cool because you get to see some preview for those
Yes,
interested.
yes, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think Kindle shows you that much of a preview.
Could you please share the last
That's the
slide
slide.
links?
Yep, I will send these all to Cecilia, and Cecilia will share it with you.
All right. And Vanessa is asking, how about something like page level security?
Page level security. Okay, yeah, that is also another question that I get, quite common scenario, and I have written about that as well. So I would say, first, short answer, there is no visual level or page level security in Power BI, right? There is no option to say, for example, you have access to this page, but not that page. So those methods that I'm explaining are more like workarounds. They are not really solution, but they work really well. One option is that you have this data set. You use it as a shared data set. Instead of having all the pages in the same report, you split it into multiple reports. You have these 2 pages in this report, then you create another report with 2-3 pages, another report with 2-3 pages, and then share each report to their own audience, right? And because they are all connected to the same shared data set, your row-level security configuration are in this data set, so it will propagate everywhere. That is one option. Another option is that you can use some of the tricks using bookmarks and things like that. So you can create all the pages in one report, but then hide all of your pages, create a slicer with having all your page names in it, so that when you click on that slicer, it goes and bring that page using bookmarks and things like that. Then the list of your pages should be in a table in your data model, and then you should have somewhere saying that this user has access to this page. So then, because it is in your data model, you can control the row-level security. I have written an article exactly explaining those processes, so make sure to go and check RADACAD website for that.
A lot of content in the blog. If you go to search, you will find so many articles coming from 2016 with SSAS. Yeah, a lot of content. Any other questions? Anyone is struggling with row-level security? Ed, I see your
Yeah, I have
microphone.
a question. So, the bigger companies aren't going to deal with the static or they're going to use groups. You've got thousands of end users out there. So what are companies mostly doing? Are they using Active Directory, groups? Are they using SharePoint groups? Or, what sources are out there available, for groups? Is it just Azure Active Directory? What else is available to use?
Yeah, I would say the most common is Azure Active Directory, because let's say if you go and create a Teams channel, this creates like a security group behind the scene. If you go and create a SharePoint Online, let's say group, that creates a security group behind the scene. All of these are creating security group in Office 365. So one usual scenario for this, and in those security groups, all the content of security is kind of embedded, like when there is a security group created or a Teams channel created for the finance team. So it's kind of obvious that finance team, they are all part of this. So this is for the finance team. So that scenario I explained about user profile situation. So in that situation, the profile would be actually the groups, the Active Directory groups, Azure Active Directory groups, where the users would be the actual users. And the relationship between these, all of these can be actually fetched from Azure Active Directory using PowerShell scripts or things like that, which populates all the Active Directory security groups, the users, the relationship between these. So you know that this is member of this group, that is member of another group. And then this is based on the Active Directory, meaning that if someone just go and add and remove someone from an Active Directory group, that would be all applied in Power BI dataset in the next refresh. So it doesn't really need any maintenance.
So you don't have to actually make a connection. You can just put the group name there and it'll know if that person's logged in.
Yeah, because we would have the person's email, and then based on that, we would know this person belongs to this group, and this group has access to this part of the data and the rest. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Feel free to go unmute, drop the question in the chat. A lot of thank yous. Great presentation, as usual. All right.
And you guys all have my email account, just in case you have any questions in the future, you can reach out to me. In RADACAD website, there are lots of places for contact us.
Yep.
Don't be surprised if you see one of us at your door in New Zealand someday.
Oh yeah, that would be great if you can come around.
All right, so I don't want to take much more of your time. If there are not any other questions, I would like to thank you so much for this presentation. It was great, and thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Cecilia, for organizing and hosting it, and everyone for joining.
Yeah, well, much appreciated. Joseph saying, all right, thank you. Thank you, everyone.